Hi there, I'm Jay LaValle and this is Joe Janet and welcome to our YouTube channel. Today's subject is Superman. We're going to be doing it on comic books. Before we get into the subject today, I'd like to give a brief history of the origin of comic books in America. And then we'll get into the story. Make it noteworthy. As a printed medium, comics have existed in America since the printing of the Adventures of Obadiah Oldbuck in 1842 in hardcover, making it the first known American prototype of a comic book. With proto-comic periodicals appearing early in the 20th century, many citing Dell Publishing's 36-page Famous Funnies as the first true American comic book.
Interesting. Now you got to remember the time that we're talking about. In order to get something out like this, these were drawn caricatures that went out in the major cities, the heartlands, and places on the backwater streets. They were not even privy to this because, well, they had things to do. When you're talking about the early 20th century, you're talking about people hardworking. They didn't have time. The majority of, unfortunately, people didn't read past a certain grade level. Mm-hmm. So in looking at certain things, written art was considered to be something of a novelty. Now, were they collected? No, not likely. Yeah. Were there any printings, any copies of these laying around? You know what? I hope they were. Yeah. The likelihood, they were utilized after they were read for wrapping paper.
Yeah. Well, most of the comic books of that time period were basically reprints of the Sunday Funnies.
That being said, how many people have ever received the Sunday Funnies present from somebody because they couldn't buy wrapping paper? Again, this is what I'm saying.
Yep. Which brings us to today's subject, Superman, which turned comic books into a major industry and ushered in the golden age of comics with the Action Comics #1, created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, which is put up by DC.
Now, when you look at when this was originally created, you had the Man of Steel, you had the introduction of an alien on this planet. Now, if that didn't shake up the American people, and they wanted to believe in this, that was just the beginning of it, because it snowballed, and snowballed fast. Yep. We had such an opening with Superman that people didn't care what the story was. They didn't care about the artwork. They didn't think anything could get better. This was something that they could hold, they could read, and lose themselves in their imagination.
Well, it was brainchild, like I said, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, who were Jewish, and in their upbringing and whatnot, they wanted to make somebody who was different from the others around them to bring freedom and prosperity and what will later become truth, justice, and the American way.
Now, that's a great sentiment. If you think about what they foresaw and they were able to capture in creating a comic that would not only rattle the status quo as a funny page, being what comics were at the time, but something that would sit there and make people think and introduce things that, if it wasn't for comics, we wouldn't have 90% of the things we have today. Yeah. Because they showed you things that weren't possible at this time, but yet it was a way of getting there. It was a vehicle to show ideas out, rocket ships to other planets.
Yep.
Cell phones off television shows eventually. Cartoons started all this trend and started all these science fantasy type things. Yep. If it wasn't for early comics, would we have TV today?
Or would we have shows like Star Trek or Star Wars?
It just boggles the mind when you start to look back at it all, how far we've come from, the 1950s, where these items became very popular. I mean, notwithstanding the 1930s, the 1940s, we were at war. Yep. And they sat there and gave us something to hope for. We needed a hero. We saw, large adversaries across the world. We didn't understand it. We didn't have television to tell everybody this. We had radio.
Yeah.
90% of his story with the comic books was off the radio.
Yeah, which is what I was getting into on my next subject. It didn't take long before Superman ventured into other media like the movies, big screen. In February of 1940, listeners could listen in to the adventures of Superman on the radio. It was over the radio where Superman first ran into Kryptonite, met Daily Planet Cub reporter Jimmy Olsen, and became associated with Truth, Justice, and the American Way.
Now, when you think about that, you have people at night sitting around before their entertainment to listen to the radio. You had the Long Ranger. You had Superman. You had adventures that came out. You had certain stories that people can recount. And when you listen to the stories and you have that in your head before you go to bed at night,
yeah.
Okay, your imagination races with everything trying to digest it all.
Yeah, and it's about this time in 1941 where DC sued Fawcett Comics over copyright infringement.
There we go.
Because of Fawcett Comics' Captain Marvel, Shazam.
Shazam. Now, if you take a look at where this has all gone, okay, and you know, notwithstanding the 60 years of turmoil, we have DC now in 2018. We have them getting ready to release a Shazam movie.
Yep. Like I said, over the next couple of decades, from 1941, the lawsuit and counter lawsuits, because they fired back and forth, went back and forth over the two companies, as DC seemed to copy from Fawcett. An example of this is when Captain Marvel was the first of the two characters to actually fly.
There we go. You know, when you think about everything they could have done with Superman, it harkens back to the Superman of the carnival, the traveling carnival.
Yeah.
The men who lifted weights and was able to lift those giant barbells. And that was the only inclination you had of a Superman. But when DC decided to make him fly, to make him bulletproof, to make him, you know, the ultimate Avenger. Oops.
Yeah. Now he's into Marvel now. Walt Disney Disney Company is trying to buy DC right now too.
That would be interesting because you would have one company owning both major franchises,
Yeah.
Marvel and DC, and could they finally do a battle between all of them at once?
Yeah, or like I said, or maybe having somebody like Iron Man or somebody else battling off against the Joker.
Could it be a crossover? Could it be something that deals with all these multi-universes? Could they come up with something that is a parallel Earth?
Yep.
It would be interesting if DC ended up with them all. But my question right now, or not DC, but if Disney ended up with them all, but my question is why? Why would you want? Right now, there's a competition between both houses, and that competition is so good. It's good for business. If you stagnate it and put it under one label, all you're doing is the same old, and you'll never change. You're going to find that there's, look, there are DC fans, there are Marvel fans. There are some people that are in the middle that collect both. But when you take a Marvel fan, a true Marvel fan, and a true DC fan, and put them across the table from each other, you have the most spectacular arguments because they will tell you who copied who and when and where and why, and be it in a comic book that you haven't heard of. They've sat there and they've done their research and they are ready for this fight.
Oh yeah, and the post-World War II era, on the radio, this was on the radio program, a young writer and activist named Stetson Kennedy decided to expose the secrets of the KKK by going undercover with law enforcement. Law enforcement was hesitant to build a case against the Klan because of their size. But Kennedy approached the writers of the radio show, just so happened to have been looking for a new villain, and the panel was a perfect match. and the story was the Clan of the Fiery Cross.
Here we go.
And that brings us to 1948.
Well, before we go there, I want to explain something. During that time period, there was a lot of turmoil in the South, and the people of the North that lived in rural areas weren't exposed to a lot of this, and they weren't made aware of it unless it came over the radio at night.
Yep.
And that group of people that took the opportunity to seize up and create the Klan as the villain that was subsequently found that they were. And I want to say that for the right reason. They were burning crosses. They were terrorizing people. And it is so documented in history. For whatever their reason, I found as a child growing up and listening to the radio, and as a person who watched all the TV shows, I found the information that you received off those versions was, an opportunity to look something up, an opportunity to understand what you didn't know, and for you to form your own opinions. And would I, as a military brat, ever been exposed to these items, being overseas, being in the North, being in the South, being in different places during those time periods? I doubt it. Radio and television created a vent for a lot of people that were frustrated about a lot of things publicly and politically. But comic books lived forever. It wasn't just a soundbite. It wasn't just there and done. The comic book was in your hand, and you could read it over and over. And when we got to the comics, okay, it became a lifeline. You could refer to it. You could sit there and go back, and you could sit there and say, no, this happened here, and this happened this way. And you could have intelligent conversations with other people. And if it was only about a comic book character, but what it did, it made us ready and able to have conversations with adults about real things later on, not comic books, because they didn't want to hear it. They bought comic books for us at 10 cents a piece, as they wanted us to shut up and sit in the back seat.
Yep. Yeah. In 1948, actor Kirk Allen was in the leading role to play Superman in the movies.
Yep. And Superman, from his early adaptation, be it on the movies, be it on the television screen, he was everything. They gave it to you all in one. He was bulletproof. He could fly. He could jump. He could leap over the tallest building. There wasn't anything that was going to stop him at the beginning. Then they realized, oh my, if we make Superman in charge and he has taken everything and taken out all the bad guys, who's he going to fight? We've got to find a way to make him weak. And what they did, and it was brilliant, because the backstory of Superman, he came from a planet which exploded, and he traveled here on a rocket ship. But in doing so, when he traveled here, parts of that exploding planet, which went across the universe, and I'm sorry, they keep bringing it here. It's here on Earth, but it's not just on Earth. Kryptonite is everywhere. As far as I'm concerned, it didn't just come in one direction. Kryptonite had to go to different planets. It had to become dust. It is in the cosmos, and I don't see how another alien has never grabbed a hold of a piece of kryptonite and said, wondered what this green rock was good for. Now we know. On your knees. We've got you.
Yeah, sometimes it seems like Superman's a kryptonite magnet.
He is. No matter where he goes. Somebody's got red, blue, green, black. Kryptonite is kryptonite. How did these people keep it on the planet if it's so bad for them? As you explained to me while we were off camera, the explosion changed the stone from Krypton into different parts and into different pieces. Well, if that happened, and now here's my rebuttal. Why is it a different color? Why is there red, blue, green, and all these? Yes, different ores on the planet, different colors after an explosion. I understand heat. I understand how this happens. But why is only certain parts and certain colors here on Earth green? Green for the longest time. Nobody knew about black. Nobody knew about red. Nobody knew about blue. Only green. Are these other colors being used as a subsequent? You know, we ran a storyline, DC. Come on, help us. Kryptonite. There needs to be more of a backstory. How far did it spread? If it landed all the way to Earth?
And there's the white kryptonite, which only affects plants.
My word. Here we go. All right. Look, kryptonite, there's got to be a finite amount of it. The planet was only so big. It blew up. And my biggest question is, if we have so many different colors of it, and I want to say this for the right reason, could the different colors of kryptonite come from the different races of people that were on Krypton? It becomes a moral question. Is this stone that they're utilizing against him, if not mineral or tainted with the body of a Kryptonian, then what is it? And what was it prior to the explosion?
My thoughts on that is it's a mineral substance from the planet that had a different chain reaction as it exploded. That's where you're getting the different colors.
That's a good way to look at it, and I hope DC decides that they're going to explain this a little bit better.
Yeah. In 1952, Superman finally jumped onto the small screen.
Television box, black and white. All folks who had a black and white TV, raise your hand. Now, I hope you folks are following along. No, color TVs didn't come first, and black and whites weren't just made for special effects.
Well, now we're just going to discuss some of the key issues of the Golden Age. Other than action number 1.
Action number 1, the introduction of Superman lifting the car of a gangster. He was so strong. My problem with number 1. Okay, here goes. We were introduced to a fully grown Superman with his uniform, his costume, his outfit. Call it his look. We saw the curly QS.
Yep.
We saw the S on his chest. And we understood it stood for hope, justice, and the American way. My problem with number 1. What if? And that came later. What if? And it came on a different version, which was a lot later. What would have happened if Superman didn't land in Kansas? And there we ended up with a option for DC to create Superman on another universe,
Yep.
which they ran with.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole different story, which we're
Later
not going
on.
to go into.
Yeah, we're not going there yet, folks.
Yeah. Action Comics number 23. First appearance of Lex Luthor.
Lex Luthor, 19 what?
I didn't get that down the date.
I would
year.
say somewhere in the 1950s.
Probably actually the 40s.
40s? Okay, here we are in the 1940s. Lex Luthor was introduced. Not his father, not anyone else. Lex is still with us, folks. If nothing else, in the Batman versus Superman, Lex is younger than he was. How long are we going to keep humans around as villains that don't pass on the mantle? Be it their son, be it their grandson, be it someone else that has come along to destroy Superman because of vendetta, because you killed my ancestor. Superman's been around for a long time. Let's age the non-appropriate, non-alien people, folks.
You know what DC's doing? They're taking the Philosopher's Stone from Harry Potter and giving it to Lex Luthor.
Of course. Now, if you take a look, no, don't laugh. If you haven't seen the new Legion of Doom, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but you know what? A lot of multi-universe stuff is happening again. We have seen a lot of things age, and one of the things that we haven't seen with all the changes throughout Superman's life is the back character. Lois Lane, human, still looks good all these years later. Lex Luthor, sorry, he's still bald. He hasn't grown his hair back.
Yep.
Okay?
They're all taken from the same philosopher's stone.
Exactly. Everybody's drinking at the same well. All right, what else we got?
50 Action Figure Hunks number 51. First appearance of the Prankster.
Now, the Prankster, if everybody remembers from our previous shows, that he is very close to the Trickster. I'm sorry, but it's almost like DC at the time didn't have much of an imagination, and they kept running these characters very close to each other.
Well, this is before the Flash.
Well, no, I understand that. But if you take a look at the characters, they were all pretty much the same.
Oh, yeah.
They changed their costume a little, and they were, well, look at it this way. They were bent on taking over the world.
Yeah.
Well, we haven't
And,
saw a change in that.
Oh, yeah. And Action Comics 64, first appearance of the Toy Man.
Again, wants to take over the world, and he's utilizing toys. Now, he had some very impressive toys. The majority of some of his toys were stilt monsters. They were, and he eventually helped create a character called Stiltman.
Yep.
These were very large adaptations of toy robots or anything else that we understood and that we had so we could relate to them. Oh, what would happen if we made, I don't know, this 50 feet big and set it loose on the city next door? And what damage would it cause? We need Superman.
Yep. Superman Comics, number 30. First appearance of, and please forgive me if I get the name wrong, Mr. Mxyzptlk.
Now, very unique character. Now we have somebody different. Being from a different universe.
Fifth Dimension.
Fifth Dimension. And he sits there, and in order for him to go away, because, well, he's a big prankster, he has to say his name backwards. Now, if you knew that was one thing that would, like, mess you up, how would you not recognize that and not say it?
Yeah.
Okay? If I saw my name spelled backwards, I'm not going to try to butcher that.
Problem is, a lot of people can't spell his name right.
Yeah. And, you know, look, even to this day, he is a character that is very unique. And how do you find out? And why did he tell Superman that was a way to get rid of him? Because he had to.
Oh, yeah.
Superman wouldn't have thought of that.
Like I said, he's just having fun. He's just there to do tease and see how much of a pain in the ass he can be to Superman.
And he was.
Oh, yeah.
And he was. He came and, you know, I hate to say it, but if you look back at the character, he was almost like a nymph, or, you know, he was just one of those kind of characters that was just out to play tricks on people and have fun.
Well, that's going to there's a chemical character similar to Mr. Mxyzptlk. That'll bring us into next week's episode of Batman. There's the Bat Knight.
Again, we have DC running with the same kind of invented characters from one to another that was, I don't know, their way of creating their world without infringing on anyone else's.
Yep. And finally, Superman Comics number 61. The first appearance of Green Kryptonite in comics.
Yeah. Again, green, red, blue, white, black. Look, they're not going to stop. That's just like the Lantern Corps. They're going to use every color there is in order to create a certain emotion. If you have red, you have anger.
Yep.
If you have, you know, yellow, you have strength. You know.
Well, the colors don't reference that way. Red always had strange and unpredictable effects on Superman. Yellow was supposed to take away his powers. Green was supposed to weaken him. Blue Kryptonite was actually a copy of Green Kryptonite that made Bizarro.
Yeah.
The same machine. So it had different effects.
And again, why so many different colors? Okay. Yes, if you have so many wide colors and it's spread everywhere, because apparently it is, okay, and again, Earth wasn't a magnet for all these different colors of kryptonite. We didn't have a way of pulling it all down. So this stuff must be spread throughout the universe. And every time, which we'll get into next time, that Superman, yeah, Superman turns around and plays around going into outer space, he should be affected by everything that's out there and every planet. And he should be scared about running into a planet where he has to fix something and some alien goes, hey, here, have this as a token of our appreciation. And all of a sudden, he's he got to do? Swat it out of the guy's hand? He goes, no, that'll kill me.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, well, that's all for today.
Yes, and thank you. Subscribe. And
please like, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.
bye now.